Hey everyone, it's Blake here with ChessPathways.com, and in today's opening video, we're going to be talking about the Halloween Gambit. The Halloween Gambit starts out as a 4 knights game, which begins e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, and knight to f6. This is a somewhat common opening. It's definitely very much aligned with the opening principles. White's most popular moves here are to play bishop to b5 or pawn to d4. And I covered the 4 knights game earlier in this openings video series. I'll go ahead and put a link down in the description if you're curious about White's more conventional ways to handle the 4 knights game. And by the way, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any future content, make sure you visit chesspathways.com and get signed up. I'll send you a free move-by-move guide to chess thinking when you do. But in the Halloween Gambit here, White plays this move, knight takes e5, sacrificing a knight just to wipe out Black's central pawn here in the center. And after Black plays knight takes e5, White's going to continue here with pawn to d4. This is the idea. White's down a piece for just a pawn, but White's going to get a big space advantage here. Now, objectively, this is definitely not a sound opening for White. I would not recommend you play this in a serious game. There's simply no way for White to get enough compensation for a full knight here if Black plays properly. That said, it's definitely a very fun opening, and you can win very fast if Black plays incorrectly. I have good memories of studying this opening. It was one of the first opening ideas that really caught my eye as a beginner. I learned this opening back in 2010, and I still remember a full game someone showed me where they won very quickly using this opening with White. So I'm going to share that game with you today. In that game, Black played knight to c6 here, saving their knight. White advanced onward with d5, knight to e5 and f4, knight g6 and e5. White keeps harassing those knights. After knight to g8, White played here d6, trying to make this pawn kind of a thorn in Black's side here. It's all up in the king's face. And after Black exchanged here on d6, White's threatening to win material back with queen e2, when Black would not be able to block this check without losing a piece. Probably Black should play queen f6 here or something like that, so Black can always play king d8 later. But in this game, Black played queen h4, trying to provoke g3, I guess, and after g3, now the queen went back to f6. Black's threatening to recapture here on d6, but White can play knight to b5, not only defending the d6 pawn, but also threatening knight c7 with a fork. Black played king to d8. White played bishop e3, possibly attacking this a7 pawn, and also stopping Black from playing a6 to kick the knight away, as we're about to see, because in the game, Black played here a6, and this was one of the first examples of a windmill tactic I saw as a beginner. White can play here bishop b6, king e8 is forced, knight c7 check, king d8 is forced, and now we have a windmill here. The knight can take the rook with check, the king comes back, knight c7, White's reloading here. White can go ahead and take this pawn because why not? The king can only go to e8, knight c7, king d8, knight d5, king e8, and finally the windmill ends. White plays knight takes f6 here. Finally, Black can play a move without being in check. Black can take this knight, probably with the knight. But of course, the game's over here. Black's down a queen, and Black resigned in this position. So there's an example of the power of the Halloween Gambit if your opponent misplays their position. Let's take a look at how Black could have handled this line, though, to avoid that fate. After knight takes e5, d4, if Black chose to play knight c6, d5, knight e5, f4, knight g6. This is all fine from Black. Black's knights are getting kicked around, but Black is still up a piece, and White doesn't have anything concrete to show for it yet. After d6, c takes d6, e takes d6. We mentioned queen f6 as a possible improvement here for Black, instead of playing queen h4 and then f6. I don't think it's helpful for Black to make White play this move g3. That's just helping their bishop possibly get on this diagonal later if it ever wants to. And if White tries the same idea here with knight to b5, Black can actually play the somewhat surprising knight takes f4 here, simply allowing the fork here on c7. After knight c7, king d8, knight takes a8, Black can play queen e5 check here, and White's under a lot of pressure. They have to play bishop e2 to block this check, and Black's going to pick up this d6 pawn. Black will probably take on g2 first with check, and this knight could be trapped in the corner if this d6 pawn falls. And remember, even though White won a rook in the corner, White had sacrificed a piece earlier, so White's really only up the exchange, and Black is going to get quite a few pawns for that exchange. After knight takes f4, we looked at knight c7. White probably shouldn't give this check on the e-file yet, because now the knight can simply seal off this file, So what if white tries to exchange this knight off and then play queen to e2? Well, now, after king to d8, white's really going to miss the absence of this dark squared bishop. White's not really able to coordinate an attack as effectively here. For example, if white plays rook d1 defending this pawn, black can simply keep developing with a move like knight f6, and again, it's not very clear what white actually has for the piece here. The king is exposed here on d8, but concrete threats are going to be hard to come by. Black also has a good alternative back here on move 5. So far we've only been looking at knight c6, d5, knight back to e5, and f4, but black doesn't have to allow white to get those extra pawn moves in. After a d4 here, black can just come to g6 right away. Now after e5, knight g8 is still unfortunately forced here for black, but black did manage to avoid giving white some extra moves here with tempo like f4. Here white usually plays bishop c4, continuing their aggressive plan here, targeting this weak f7 square. And black certainly has to show some care here. For example, black could blunder by playing b6, which would allow white to play queen f3 here, threatening checkmate and threatening to win the rook in the corner, so black would not want to do this. Black can play something like bishop b4, just developing a piece, and after white continues their aggression with queen to f3, black sometimes sacrifices a pawn here with d5. This is a well-known idea from openings like the King's Gambit, where black simply returns a pawn here to try to speed up their development, but it's probably also not necessary. Black can just defend here with queen e7. After white goes ahead and gets castled here, knight d5 is threatened, so black might want to consider just taking this knight here. And the problem here from black's perspective, it's kind of hard to develop your pieces naturally. Playing a move like d6 would risk opening up the e-file here where your king and queen are lined up. But black can survive. Black can play knight h6 here. That's a good developing move to defend this f7 pawn. White seems to have a couple possible plans here. One that stood out to me was possibly playing a4 with the idea to play bishop a3. But I think after black castles, you might not really accomplish too much with this. For example, castles, bishop a3, black can just play d6. And if you exchange there and play rook e1, it's not so clear what white has really accomplished. White has two active bishops, but they remain down a whole piece. So instead, maybe white would consider playing g3 here with the simple plan to play h4 and h5, once again trying to harass these knights. These knights can't get a break, but black can just castle here, and after h4, black can play d6 here, and if white continues with h5, black gets to throw in bishop g4. White can actually defend this pawn. White can play queen h1 here, and black could play knight h8. Black could also consider just giving the piece back, though. Black could play knight takes e5 here, and after pawn takes e5, queen takes e5, and black is no longer up a piece, but they are up a pawn, and these doubled pawns here remain weak. This is a good example of a principle I talked about in my fried liver attack video, which is that when you're under attack, but your opponent has sacrificed material to get that attack, you can always consider defending by giving some material back, under favorable circumstances. That's one advantage you have when your opponent has sacrificed material. You have more options to consider when it comes to defending. If your opponent manages to get a big attack against you with equal material, you probably can't consider defending by giving up a piece because they're going to have a winning position anyway. But if your opponent has invested material into their attack, you always have that added resource of giving it back. And black stands better in this position. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this exciting opening, and make sure you get signed up on chesspathways.com. It only takes a couple seconds. I'm trying to help more players become masters, hopefully in a fraction of the time it took me. Thanks, and I'll see you there.